Hello and welcome back. Today's lecture, we are going to begin a series of lectures on the American frontier. I really, when studying the frontier, I came across a really good quote by a woman by the name of Gertrude Stein, who is famous for running an intellectual salon in Paris, hanging out with guys like Hemingway and Pablo Picasso. Really kind of an intellectual heavyweight. And one time at a party, she was asked to describe, what is America? And she describes it like this. In America, there's more space where nobody is than where anybody is. That's what makes America what it is. And I think that's, in a lot of ways turns out to be true. The frontier really becomes a, um, becomes kind of definitive of what it is to be American, right? Rugged individualism. If you're going to head out to the frontier, America is the land of opportunity. We have more land than we have people, and so there's all kinds of opportunities for cheap and free land out west. So, anybody, if you're struggling in a factory or an immigrant from a foreign nation, you can come to America and really make the American dream come true by grabbing up some land and establishing yourself firmly in the middle class. But to do that, it's not as easy as it sounds. You have to be this rugged individualist. You have to be able to sell everything you own and jump in the back of a horse-drawn wagon and travel hundreds and thousands of miles sometimes to get to through the wilderness and rugged terrain. And then when you finally get to a place you want to make your home, you've got to chop down the trees and build your own home and plow your own land. It's this idea that if you work hard you can make it, but you're gonna have to work hard. It's gonna be hard. And that's really kind of what the frontier ends up coming to represent to America. It's opportunity, but opportunity that has to be coupled with hard work and risk taking. It's not going to be easy moving out there. People are going to die, and it's a tough life. And so you can have the opportunity, but you really got to measure up to it. So, the frontier, the first thing you have to understand is what the definition of the frontier is. The frontier is defined as two or fewer people per square mile. And so, it's really kind of any land out there that's just barely inhabited. And so, the America is not the only country with a frontier. Canada has a frontier, Russia has a frontier, Australia has a frontier, but America is really going to be unique in the way that we settle the frontier. And because we're going to settle it much faster than other nations, much faster than other nations, and that's in part because we don't do it in a very orderly, organized way. We just kind of let people go out and settle it themselves. In other countries like Canada, that takes forever to settle their frontier. There's all kinds of government regulations and rules about how to get land and paperwork that has to get filled out. So it's this incredibly slow process that people really aren't able to take advantage of. In America, in some places like Oklahoma, there'll be land races where literally you'll line up on a starting line and race out there to claim your land. In other areas, it's squatters' rights. You just move out there, and if you can improve the land by building a house on it, it's yours and it's free. And in some places, there's going to be big land speculators like banks that buy it all up and then turn around and sell it at a massive profit. There's going to be some cheating going on for sure. And it's not going to be super efficient, but and it's definitely going to have some corruption involved. But it is going to get settled fast, and because of it, it's going to make lots of people, just jump out of poverty and into the middle class. So what is the philosophy of westward expansion? Well, it's going to get summed up by a guy by the name of John O'Sullivan, who's writing about moving west, and he uses a phrase, manifest destiny. And manifest destiny is the belief that the United States is destined to stretch from coast to coast. And so from all the way from the East Coast, which has been settled for a while now, and then all the way out to the Pacific Ocean on the West Coast. And so this idea, and it's key here because the word destined is going to be important. The fact that people believe that they're destined to head out west means it's like essentially an act of God, that it's their right to expand out west. Now, what might be a problem with that? Well, one of the problems with that is there are people out there. There are other countries out there. At one point, the French owned the Louisiana Territory. We've already bought that from them. But Mexico controls areas that we know today as like California, New Mexico, Nevada. The British are in the Oregon Territory. And, needless to say, the Native Americans who have had that land for generations upon generations upon generations. And so, this idea that it's our destiny to expand to all the way to the West Coast means that, we're just going to have to kind of, plow through all of those obstacles, Mexico, Native Americans, and the British. And we're going to do it in very different ways. Sometimes we'll be political about it. With the British, we're going to negotiate over the Oregon Territory. With the Native Americans, it's a combination of war and negotiation with treaties, which we're going to be incredibly manipulative about. We've discussed that in previous lectures. And with Mexico, it's going to be straight out war. We're going to take it. And in some cases, we're going to buy land, like the Gadsden Purchase, which we will buy legitimately from Mexico. Without having war being involved. So we really, to be able to get from coast to coast, we're going to use every method at our disposal to get there. And so it will fuel Native American removal, war with Mexico, diplomacy with the British. We're also going to pay off Mexico in some ways as well. And so, the idea of manifest destiny is, definitely manifests itself because there is this sense of American superiority to these other nations. And so we feel like we have more of a right to that land than these other countries because we believe we're more technologically advanced, that we'll use this land better. And because of that, we should have a right to the land. Now, one of the most famous paintings that, I think just beautifully kind of sums up what manifest destiny is all about is this painting right here, which is John Gass' American Progress. And so American Progress, you see when this picture, I think, sums up what the movement West really kind of is. The first thing that jumps out to you is the woman who, represents, you see, Columbia, most accurately, which is, the precursor to Lady Liberty, to both represent liberty. Here, she's moving from the east to the west, essentially saying she's bringing liberty, democracy out that way. You see she has in her hair what is referred to as the Star of Empire, which means that America is, starting to form its own empire by adding the West to it. As she travels to the West, she has a book in her hand, and that rope, that's actually, if you see that line that moves out west, that's a telegraph line, not a power line, a telegraph line. Those two things represent a couple of things. The books in this time period almost certainly represent the Bible and religion, but it also represents knowledge that as America moves west, right, because she's Lady Liberty or Columbia, she represents America. As she moves west, she's bringing religion and knowledge with her out west. The telegraph is the height of technology at the time. It's communication, right? Precursor to telephones, with Morse code, where you send a little electric signal that goes beep bop boop bop. It goes to a code that you translate on the other end, allows you to communicate. Beep bop boop bop, right? That's That's a good one. But anyway, that represents technology. She's bringing technology with her. The other thing you'll notice is the lighting of the painting. You see that it's bright out east and dark out west, which essentially means that she's bringing light to the dark or bringing enlightenment out west. That out west, and so you look to the west over there where the dark is. You'll see Native Americans that were referred to at the time as savages, and so, they're looking over the shoulder, kind of fleeing the American settlement, which is certainly what the natives are doing. But it's implying that she's bringing civilization and enlightenment to the dark, savage part of the country. Now, what you'll also see at the very bottom of the screen, so right here, you'll see a group of people, group of settlers. There are actually three different stages here, and so these people right here represent the evolution of settlers. So the first settlers out west are fur trappers. They're not there to live for a very long time. They just go out, they hunt for a little while. They, trapping beaver pellets, which are worth a whole lot of money because in Europe, it's all the fashion trend to wear beaver coats and beaver hats. Their skin sheds water, so it's like the height of fashion and technology, I guess. And so fur trappers are the first people out there. They're not permanent settlers, but they're exploring the land. And then the next set of settlers are going to be miners. And so they show up. You see the pickaxe over the guy's shoulders. He goes out there. They're going to set up at least semi-permanent establishments there. If you set up a mine, there'll be a mine town next to it. Some of these, like Denver and like San Francisco, will end up becoming permanent towns. Others will end up being boom towns, and then eventually will end up being ghost towns and be abandoned. But that's going to really bring the first villages. And so then underneath my picture here, so right below me here, you're going to see the next evolution of settlers, and that's going to be farmers. And the farmers are there for the long haul, and really are going to symbolize a permanent kind of status. Now, if you look just above the settlers here, so right here, you're going to see from right here, the middle section of the painting, you're going to see the evolution of transportation to the west. So at the very top, you see a lone rider. That rider represents the Pony Express. You see a canista wagon right here, and then you're going to see a stagecoach right here. So the first one you see is the canista wagon. That comes first before the Lone Rider, because those canista wagons, those are the wagons that are bringing the first people to permanently settle out west. Right? You would sell all your belongings on the East Coast. You would buy one of these wagons, which was like kind of, the tank of wagons. You would throw all your belongings in the back, the family, and you would head out west, a lot of times sleeping in the wagon or under the wagon. And, that's what brought you and your family out west. You would then set up the first kind of village farm and then villages. Those settlers would do that. Then comes that guy, the Lone Rider, who represents the Pony Express. The people have to show up before the Pony Express because the Pony Express are delivering the mail. And so you have to have the villages established before the Pony Express shows up. Then you've got the stagecoaches. And the stagecoaches are a much more comfortable version of transportation. Right. So that implies you're starting to get some wealth moved out west. So, the wealth comes out there after the first settlers and after the beginnings of civilization that gets established with the mail and the Pony Express. And then if you see just above me here, what comes next are the railroads. And so that's when you're really going to get a boom. By the time we get the railroads out west, the frontier will be closed. That land is still there, but we don't call it the frontier anymore because there's more than 2 people per square mile. And then in the back, you're going to see the Mississippi River right out here with the steamboats, sailboats, and then steamboats on the Mississippi River. And we know that's the Mississippi River because the West really starts kind of on the other side of the Mississippi. Now, that's the evolution of transportation. Now, in the far corner, what you see running off of the screen are the Native Americans. You're going to see there's bison kind of in the middle of the painting, all the way to the west. You're going to see the animals, all of them kind of running away, looking back in terror. And so it does kind of show the dark side of what happens when American settlers move west. But we're going to see a displacement of the natives. We're going to see a displacement of the wildlife, right? We go from having 100 million bison to about 200 bison by the late 1800s. I mean, we're going to devastate the beaver population as well. That's kind of our fault. That's mostly Europe's fault. Bison, that's on us. But either way, John Gast's painting really kind of sums up most of the travel to the West. So, what's the background here? The frontier geographically is going to extend from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. It's that area we think of today as the Midwest. It's defined as 2 or fewer people per square mile. Right. By 1850, the population of America has just grown crazy, and so we've got about 23 million people. When we start settling the West, and this is crazy to think about, the first 400 million acres that we are able to settle in the United States takes about 250 years. The second 400 million acres going to take 30 years. That's how quickly we're going to send people out west. And that's because we have this growing population and they're looking, what can I do? I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for something. And if you're young and you're poor, right, if you want to be able to escape that poverty or the terrible conditions in some of these factories, you can just, John O'Sullivan says it, go west, young man, go west. And you can start your own family there. You can have your own home. You're going to have to build it yourself, but you can be self-sufficient. You can work for yourself. And it really is a ticket into the middle class. And so, it really comes to represent the opportunity that we have in America. Our economy is based on farming. 64% of America are farmers. And so, again, another stat to show you how quickly we're going to do this: between 1870 and 1900, more land is going to come under cultivation than the previous 250 years. So we're going to be farming more than ever, which is our legacy as Americans. We are the breadbasket of the world. We're one of the few countries, even today, that is a net exporter of food. Right? We not only are able to grow enough to feed us, but we feed significant portions of the rest of the world. So why would people want to head west? Well, there's lots of different reasons. Part of it is the thrill of adventure. A lot of like the dime store novels are going to romanticize the West. They're really going to tell kind of this untrue story. They're going to talk about the wildness, fighting Native Americans. They're going to tell stories about like Wild Bill Hickok and his lifestyle, which are largely exaggerated. And so it's thrilling for young men to go out and have this kind of adventure, prove their worth, fighting Native Americans, exploring unknown regions. You've got Daniel Boone and all these kind of American mythological like heroes, even though they're real people, their reputations have expanded to almost a mythical status. The idea of getting rich quick with gold. Interestingly enough, we are going to find gold in several places. The biggest gold rush is going to happen in California, and then later in Alaska after the Civil War. There's going to be a huge gold rush. People hoping to get rich quick. You're going to find most people don't get rich quick. Interestingly enough, if you want to get rich during the gold rush, you don't mine for gold. you sell shovels. I think that's an important life lesson for everybody to hear. Don't be the one taking the risk. Be the one selling to the people that are taking the risk. John D. Rockefeller will use that later. He decides not to drill for oil, but to refine it. Let other people take the risk, and you make the money off of it. And so, interesting fact about the gold rush: the people that really get rich are the ones selling the shovels, not the one looking for the gold. There's other reasons. A large part of it too is because we're starting to overcrowd our cities. There's bad economic conditions. The East Coast is being over-farmed. A lot of areas in the East Coast, the soil is being used up. The people have already either bought the soil. Families own them, so prices are going up dramatically. And so if you're poor or young or the second son, right? First son inherits dad's property. What's the second son going to do? You can join the clergy, you can go work in a factory, or you can head out west and farm the way you farmed your whole life. And so they're going to head out. You have a choice. If you're a low paid city worker, you can work. I mean, a lot of times if you're working in, one of these new manufacturing plants, things like that, you're going to have to work, best case scenario, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Worst case scenario, 12 to 14 hours a day. There's no minimum wages. There's no safety standards. And so, that's a grinding life. And if you're going to work that hard, you might as well do it in the open air and do it for yourself out west. And so low paid city workers will leave. Now, that's not an option for every low paid city worker. Right? If you grew up in the city, what do you know about building your own home and farming? Maybe not that much. And so, it's just not a viable option for all city workers. But if you got a good head on your shoulders and are willing to work hard and are not risk averse, then it is an opportunity. There's this growing sense of class separation that these people that have gotten in on the ground floor of the factory system, they're creating really serious amounts of wealth. And a lot of poor people feel like they're left behind, and that if they're ever going to break out of poverty, the West is an option. And so they're going to take it. Southern planters have also overplanted. They're used up the land. Gigantic plantations have bought up all the good land. That's why there's actually very few as a percentage of the population, there's very few slave owners in the South, because you have to be incredibly wealthy to be able to buy a large enough plantation for it to be popular. City conditions are also awful. You can see pictures here. There's just, think about it. If you're talking about the early 1800s, there's no air conditioning in the city, so it's awful in the summer. There's no heat in the winter. There's no safety conditions. There's no number of people in a house. And so a lot of these apartments have multiple families living in them, and you're talking about, a few hundred square feet with multiple families living in them. There's no sewage systems in a lot of these places. So what you're doing is, you're going to the bathroom at night, essentially in a bucket. And then in the morning, hopefully somebody takes it downstairs and dumps it in the outhouse. Hopefully they don't just throw it out the window, but a lot of people do just dump it out the window. And so there's this acrid smell. There's no trash collection in a lot of these places. Disease run rampant. And so, just for health reasons, it's good to potentially head out west. So during this series of lectures, we're going to put all of this together, the continental United States. We have already in previous lectures added Florida. We have, Jefferson bought Louisiana in a previous lecture. But this series of lectures, we're going to add Texas. We're going to add the former Mexican territory of California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and then the Oregon territory. And we'll culminate with the Gadsden Purchase. And so that is Manifest Destiny. It's connecting the 1783 states all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So, one of the ways that we're going to try to get settlers out west and encourage people to take that risk, to give up the safety of the East Coast, is to essentially provide them with an economic stimulus to leave. And that's going to be the Homestead Act. It's just, look, if you want to go out west, we will essentially give you land for free to be able to settle that territory. We know that there are other nations out west, right, that stake claims to that land. Mexico, Great Britain. The more Americans we have out there, a better claim we have to the land. Plus, it's it's going to create new cities and new economic opportunities. So this is really valuable for America. So the idea is go west, improve the land, and we'll give you 160 acres. 160 acres is generally agreed by the government and people to be the amount that you need to farm to essentially be middle class. It's enough to feed your family, but also have enough crop left over to sell your surplus so you can have a little bit of extra cash for savings or to buy, extra items or items that you need. And that's what being middle class is, right? It's making enough to take care of all of your needs, some of your wants, and save for the future. And so that's kind of the idea behind 160 acres. Now, this was mostly supposed to go to poor farmers and people on the East Coast. But a lot of this land is going to end up in the hands of land speculators. And so land speculators are people who snatch up land inexpensively because they think they can turn around and flip it for a profit later. And so most of the people that are going to take advantage of the Homestead Act are going to be these land speculators. And so 600,000 people are going to take advantage of the Homestead Act, roughly 600,000, and only about 10% of them are going to be these kind of small farmers. Now, that's cheating the system. There's no doubt about it. And so, middle class and wealthy people are going to make a good amount of money off this. It's not all bad though, because these land speculators, to make a profit, what they do is twofold. One, they have to kind of get people to claim their 160 acres, and then they buy the land from those individual citizens. So if I'm somebody living on the East Coast, I get a free 160 acres out west. Now, I'm never going to do that because I would die. I can't farm. I've got a little garden, but I can barely garden. I definitely can't build my own house. And so there's no way I'll ever go. So a lot of these like wealthy banks and businessmen come to me knowing I'm never going to use that 160 acres and say, look, I'll buy that 160, you claim that 160 acres and I'll buy it off you for pennies on the dollar. And maybe I pocket a little bit of cash, but that's cash that I wasn't going to have anyway. So are you really stealing 160 acres from me in that situation? Maybe, maybe not. Right? They are going to swindle some people that might have gone anyway. So there's going to be some like clearly bad behavior here. But there's also going to be a lot of like, well, I'll sell you mine because I ain't going to use it anyway. And if you're paying me less than it's worth, whatever, it's just free cash for me. Then what these land speculators do with the land is also important because they're most likely going to improve the land. What they're going to do is they're going to capture a large chunk of land in one specific area. They're going to maybe build a schoolhouse, a city center, which would be really just like kind of one small building with a jail in it and room for the mayor or whatever, a school and a feed store. And then, once you have those amenities, right, then they can charge more money for the land, but also it makes it more appetizing for people to move out west, right? So it's, I'm not going to move out west unless there's a store there where I can, if I've got to like build my own house and I have to cut my own firewood and grow all my own food and I don't have a store to provide medicine and the things that I need, there's no way I'll ever go. But if you have some of that infrastructure there, I might pay a little bit more, or pay money when it could have been free to live in a place that has some of that infrastructure. And so the land speculators do some shady stuff to get that land, but there's also a benefit from that. So, 160 acres is going to just cause kind of this flood of people heading out west. Railroads will end up grabbing most of this land. As a matter of fact, the railroads, because the government wants to connect the country with railroads because that's how you get real economic development and real economic growth. And so, the government doesn't have any money. We don't have an income tax yet. They don't have money to pay railroads to build railroads. So the one thing that they do have to encourage the railroads to build as much as they can out west is land. And so essentially what they're going to do is for every mile of track that railroads lay, they're going to give the railroads land on either side of that track. And so railroad companies will get about 170 million acres of land from the government, worth about $500 million. And so the reality is railroads are going to make more money building track than they actually are going to make shipping goods and people. So it's one of the downsides to that is we're going to overbuild railroads, right? If their biggest payday is building railroads, they're going to build much more railroad than they need to. Plus, they're not going to be built efficiently. Right. If I want to travel from New York to LA, I want to travel in as straight of a line as possible, or say St. Louis, since we're talking about the West. Let's say if I'm going to travel from St. Louis to all the way to San Francisco, I want to travel in a straight line. But if the railroad companies get paid by the mile per track, how are they going to build that railroad? Are they going to build a straight line? No, they're going to do this. Right? Now, that's clearly an over exaggeration, but that is what happens. They are going to overbuild. They're going to build in crazy patterns and non efficient ways to be able to make more money. But it's because of this. This is what I was talking about earlier. It was the fact that there was corruption. The government knew there was corruption and they didn't care. That's what allowed us to settle the West as quick as we settled the West. And so, which ultimately ended up being good for everybody. So, like I said, most of the money that was being made off of for the railroads was off of the land sales that they got from the land that was given to them. Now, this is kind of what the average family heading out west looked like traveling in a Canista wagon. They had to be self-sufficient. They had to have enough food and water in that thing to last this entire trip, which could take months, in crazy conditions. People on the East Coast that have never been out west, they don't understand that, we have heat advisories in the summer, just extreme heat in the summer. We have blizzards in the winter. We've got tornadoes that you have to deal with. It's just kind of a crazy climate. The other thing that you're going to notice here is that the Midwest and out west just didn't look the way it does today. Today, there's more trees in America today than when the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock. I think that shocks people because we deforested the East Coast. But subsequently, we have planted trees all across the Midwest. The West used to be known as the Great American Desert because it was just prairie grass. Prairie grass, super tall, super thick root structure that didn't allow anything else to grow there. And that's why you could have 100 million bison roam the West, is they had all this grass to eat. And so, trees didn't grow. If you look at this picture, there's no trees around, which begs the question, what are you going to build your house out of? Well, that's right. This right here is called a soddy. It's made out of sod. You essentially built your house out of mud. And so what you would do is you would pack up some mud, throw some straw in there to kind of hold it together cohesively, and then make bricks and then pile up those bricks. And that's what you make your house of. This is actually a really nice soddy because it's got a window. Right? If you have a window out west, that had to travel in a wagon all the way out west to get there without breaking. And so that's just crazy expensive. So this is an actual real nice soddy. You see, what you do is you kind of plant grass on the top because that root structure holds the roof in. This is going to be, because it's made out of mud, it's going to be warm in the winter, it's going to be cool in the summer. So it works. Women are really going to struggle with this, right? We've talked in previous lectures about the cult of domesticity, or this idea that a woman's place is in the home and her identity is wrapped up in raising her kids and being prim and proper and beautiful and having good manners. Well, how can you be prim and proper and beautiful and have, good, manners and keep your home clean when your home's made out of mud? Right? You really can't. These things were infested with spiders and snakes. Think it's like you're building a home out of mud. You're essentially building a cave. What's in caves, right? And so women are really going to struggle with this. The idea of living in these Saudis, but there's really nothing else you can do. You have to be wealthy to build a house out of wood because you have to ship that wood all the way from the East Coast. And so until the railroads get out to wherever you're living, you're probably going to be living in a Saudi like this. And so the other thing you need to think about, if there's no wood for houses, there's no wood for fires. How are you going to heat your house in the winter? How are you going to cook your food? Cow chips, or buffalo chips. Those are dried up feces from cows and bison, and so if you dry it up, you can't light it when it's wet, but if you dry it up, you can use it as fuel. It burns. It's like a really slow burn, which means it's good for warming your house or cooking your food. You dry it up, doesn't smell as bad. I don't know that for certain, but I've been told. I've never lit feces on fire before, but I've been told you dry it up and it doesn't smell as bad, but I gotta imagine it still stinks. And so imagine a woman trying to deal with her, a woman from the East Coast trying to deal with the idea of living in mud and cooking your food with, dry cow poop. It's women out west are really going to struggle. Now, they struggle personally, but as a group, we're going to see some advancement here. We're going to see changing in gender roles, right? This idea that women aren't capable are going to be kind of left behind because women are going to have to help build the home. They're going to have to help farm, right? I mean, it's survival, and they're going to do all these things that they've told they've not been capable of. And so the daughters that grow up on the frontier are really going to kind of look at this idea like wearing dresses, like that's dumb. Like I live out on the frontier. I need to ride horses. I need to, I'm helping dad farm. Wearing a dress is stupid. I need to wear pants. And this idea that I can't do something is going to seem really ridiculous because it's like, well, I do it every day. And so, these women are going to kind of grow up with a different sense of what they're capable of, different than their mothers. So there's these very strict gender roles on the East Coast, but once you get out west, that's just going to have to go away. These gender roles are going to start to blur, and women are just going to have to be more independent. They're going to have to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty, and which means that women out west are typically going to have more rights. It's easier to get a divorce out west than it is out east because they recognize if your husband abandons you, you're going to have to get remarried because that's the only way you survive. And I don't mean the only way you can survive for a woman. It's the only way both sexes can survive. I mean, marriage in the 1800s was not like it is today. Today we marry for love, right? In the 1800s, you married is an economic arrangement. It's the man is going to do most of the farming and the hunting and all that stuff, and the woman is going to do all the other stuff that needs to be taken care of, the cooking and the cleaning and the raising children. Because the man is strong, is physically stronger than the woman, so he does most of the stuff like the farming and the hunting, and which takes all day. And then the woman stays home because there's no microwave, there's no oven, there's no washing machine. She does laundry, which takes all day. She cooks over a fire, which takes all day. It's a division of labor that kind of works. But if the husband leaves, right, you can't farm, hunt, cook, raise children, which women are biologically set to do because they can feed kids biologically. you can't clean your clothes, cook your meals, and do all that stuff. One person can't do that. So marriage is this like economic necessity. And so you're going to see women out west get more rights, not only pick up more typically male gender roles or historically male gender roles, you're also going to see them get more rights and even the right of voting. Some states out west are going to give women the right to vote because to become a state, right, you need to have a certain number of citizens living within your borders, voting citizens. And so, say the number's 30,000. I forget what the number actually is, and you have 15,000 male voters. Well, what's a quick way you can double that number real quick to reach the 30,000 threshold? Give women the right to vote. Boom, done. And so you will see that. Out west, women are picking up more of these gender roles. They're also picking up more freedoms. They start to do men's work. There's a little bit of a loss of this female identity. The women that move from the East Coast are really going to struggle with that. We know from their journals that they write home, they have a really hard time with it. They think that they've been told, they're supposed to be one way and now they have to live another way. And so you're going to see I hate to psychoanalyze people that I've never met, but you're going to see what we would probably think of as depression today setting in amongst these women because they really are kind of losing their sense of self. Their daughters, on the other hand, who don't know any other life, they're not going to have a problem with it. And they're actually going to look at their mothers and their mother's insistence that they wear dresses and that they behave a certain way, and it's going to cause strife because they're going to be thinking, "Why? That makes no sense," because they had never lived on the East Coast. So there's this kind of conflict there. So, there's women are going to try their hardest to keep their identity as East Coast women. And so you're still going to see this Victorian style of dress that you see here, even when it's just absolutely not practical. Why would you wear those dresses living in that muddy house and while you're riding horses? And so women are going to cling to that as much as they can to hold on to their identity, but it's going to be very, very difficult. Okay, that's where we're going to leave off with our lecture today. We will pick up tomorrow and talk about Texas and Texas's independence. Thank you very much for your time, and I will see you again shortly.